Burger King serves beer? This story is from a little over 10 years ago, so I was either 9 or 10 years old. If you read my post, if someone tries to kidnap you, shout fire, then you know that my dad would take us in his 18-wheeler across the eastern US, mostly so he didn't have to unload the truck because he was a lazy asshole. Anyways, I went with him one summer, and we stopped at a Burger King to eat. I forget where it was, but it was either in Kentucky, Virginia, or West Virginia. I nearly got hit in the parking lot by some douche, which was bad enough, but the real creepy shit went down once we were inside. I ordered a kid's meal with a Dr. Pepper. The cashier was this weird redneck looking dude. I remember taking a sip of my drink a little after sitting down and it tasting weird, but I had a mouthful of food at the time, so I didn't pay much attention to it. Now, ordinarily, I will chug anything caffeined or carbonated, but for some reason, something told me not to this time. After I finished eating, I took another sip. It was definitely not Dr. Pepper. I told my dad that it didn't taste like it. He tasted it, replied, "It's not," then went and yelled at the creepy looking redneck cashier. The manager fired him on the spot. I later learned in my teenage years that the flavor was that of very cheap beer. So, some creepy redneck, like a pedophile, tried to get a 9-year-old boy drunk in a Burger King. Where are you going with those? When I was 4 years old, my mom and I stopped at our local Burger King for lunch. After we ate, my mom watched me play in their little play place they had set up. As many of you may know, they had those little cubies where you put your shoes. This was about 1998, and those jelly flip-flops were all the rage. A woman in her 30s walked up to the cubie like she was shopping, examining the goods. She picked up my shoes and started out the store. My mom caught her with about halfway through the parking lot and was like, excuse me, those are my daughter's shoes?" The woman looked shocked, but not embarrassed, and after standing there in silence for a while, reluctantly handed them over. Very strange. The man in the gorilla suit. On mobile, sorry for any mistakes. Okay, so this is definitely more funny than creepy, but at the time it was terrifying. I was 10 years old and my cousin was 11 when this happened. My aunt and cousins were in town one weekend, and for some reason I can't remember, my grandmother took us all to Burger King at like 10:30 at night. I think we just wanted dessert after dinner. Anyways, we all go in together, grandmother, aunt, 11-year-old cousin, 15-year-old cousin, and me, and ordered ice cream cones. M, the younger cousin, and I decide we didn't want to eat with everyone else inside, so we go into the parking lot and sit on a curb. M was facing away from Burger King, and I was sitting to her right. There was a bush behind me. We were positioned so everyone inside could see us just in case. We were just chatting and the topic of murders and kidnappers comes up somehow. I shit you not, right as M is joking that someone could just run out of the woods and take us, I see a truck pull into the lot behind her. It caught my attention because they just stopped in the middle of the lot, not parking or anything like that. I turned my attention back to M, but then I see something open the truck door and hop out. I blink in disbelief because a man dressed like a gorilla gets out of the truck, not just a mask, but a full-on suit. He begins walking over to us, coming up behind the still oblivious M. She was too busy talking to notice me staring at the approaching person. I was in shock, and by the time I finally attempted to tell her to turn around, she had heard footsteps coming towards her and looked backwards. The guy was no more than 10 feet away at this point, and she screams incredibly loud. We both jump to our feet, and the guy starts running at us. Apparently, I freeze in these situations because I just stand there as he chases M in the circles around the bush. M is still screaming while running with her hands straight up in the air, the gorilla man pursuing her with his arms reaching for her. It was honestly like a scene out of a cheap horror movie. This goes on for a bit, and I finally come back to my senses. I stepped forward and lunged for the guy. As I looped back around, all was going through my 10-year-old brain was that M was going to be kidnapped. He avoids me, and then runs back to the truck and jumps in the bed, and then the truck takes off, driving back onto the main road. Considering I was a 410 twig, I doubt I had actually made him run off. But I realized that later that from the angle he pulled up, he probably didn't see me. I mean, because of the bush, I could see the lot, but you couldn't see me clearly if at all. We stand silently in shock for a moment, before M bursts into tears and runs inside. I follow, and we run to tell everyone when I recite what happened while M cries. Everyone thought I was joking, but M's emotional state finally convinced them otherwise. Somehow, even though the walls were glass windows, and we were in plain view from the restaurant, they didn't see any of it. We discussed it and concluded it was a prank of some sorts, due to the fact that he was in a gorilla suit and that there was someone else driving the car. In the moment, I honestly thought we were in danger, though. So, Gorilla Man, let's not meet. He thought it was funny. I've been lurking here a bit and decided to share something that happened to me when I was in high school. I was 17 years old, had just started driving, and was working in retail at a shoe store. Miserable, yes. When we would have a big promotion or something like that, we would have to decorate the store after hours, which would have us there until 11 p.m. or later. One of these nights, after working a double, I was starving and exhausted, so I decided to just drive through Burger King so that as soon as I got home I could just shower and go straight to sleep. The following events unfolded quickly, in a span of about 3 minutes. I pulled into the drive-thru behind a car where I could see there were 4 guys inside the vehicle. All had their windows rolled down and were sticking their hands out resting on the window ledge. 2 were black and 2 were white. All 4 were wearing hats. We were the only 2 cars in the drive-thru and in the parking lot in general, besides what I assumed were the workers' cars as the lobby was closed. I assumed there was a shift change going on because they were pulled up to the speaker box, but there was nobody there to take the order, or at least the guy wasn't talking into the box, so I assumed that they were just waiting. I noticed one of the guys turn around and make eye contact with me. He reached up to the guy in the passenger seat and said something to him. Then that guy turned around, looked me in the eye, and smiled. In about 2 seconds, all 4 guys returned around smiling at me. Then the guy in the passenger seat opens his car door and is getting out. Now, I don't know why, but I froze. I was just thinking, he isn't coming over. He can't be coming here. He isn't coming to me. He doesn't know me. Stop being silly. This isn't happening. Calm down. But he was coming to my car. He walked directly over to the passenger side of my car and tried to open the door. It was locked. I had locks that automatically lock when I was driving. He bent down so his face was in my window and said, "Open the door." And I just sat there. I didn't say anything, didn't hit the horn. I just looked at him. He raised his voice. "Can you hear me? I said open the door." At this point, I think I looked like I was going to cry. He must have noticed my lips shaking or something because he said, "Aww, are you afraid of me?" And he started to laugh. He just laughed out loud and started walking back towards his car, and I could see him laughing when he was getting into it. I don't think the guy driving ever ordered, because as soon as creepy guy got back into the car, they just drove away. I also just drove away, turning in the opposite direction, because I completely lost my appetite. I called my boyfriend, now husband, and told him to leave work so that he would be home by the time I got there, because I was too afraid to be home alone. I have told countless people this story, and they always say that the guy was just messing with me, or playing around, and he wasn't actually going to hurt me, right? But honestly, I don't care, because what he did still scared me to the point I will never forget it, and it makes it harder for me to feel relaxed in places, especially at night. So, I personally don't think it was funny at all. Just say you're a daddy's girl. Now, this is a relatively short story, but still unpleasant nonetheless. I worked at a Burger King for a few years, and for the first three, I was at a store in an especially scummy area of the city. There was a building nearby that a lot of strange old men lived in, most of whom were regulars in the store. I assumed it was an apartment building, but I later found out that it was a halfway house. One of the men who lived there that came in often was usually very quiet. I took his order several times, but didn't exchange much conversation outside of the usual, "Hi, how are you? What can I get started for you?" things. Now, one evening, he came in, and his total was 1063. I told him the little anecdote that I would tell all my customers with that total, that I liked it because it reminded me of my dad because he was born in October of 1963. 1063. The man asked, "Oh, are you a daddy's girl?" I just kind of paused, and it did a bit of a Tina Belcher, because I wasn't sure what to say. I'm very fond of my dad, yes, of course, but we aren't super close or anything like that. I moved out from my parents when I was 16 years old, and honestly, we don't even talk or see each other very often. So the man interjects again, saying, "Just say you're a daddy's girl." So sheepishly, I just muster up a half-hearted, yeah. Okay. The man carries on and asks, "So is your daddy strict?" I don't really remember what I said or how I wrapped up the conversation. I was probably saved by my drive-through headset dinging or something. A few months later, I discovered the National Sex Offender Registry website, and I was combing the pages, scanning for familiar faces. I actually saw quite a few that I recognized, as I mentioned before. I live in a pretty scummy city. Anyways, scrolling along, and boom, there's that man. Child molester. I too have a taxi story. I've been away, visiting other subreddits for a while, and am now just coming back to Let's Not Meet. The plethora of creepy taxi driver encounters has triggered a repressed memory of mine, although it isn't anywhere near as crazy as some of the other stories I've heard on here recently. This happened a few years ago. One of my best friends is a tattoo artist. When I want a new link, she'll book me late at night after her shop closes so that we can have some one-on-one friend time, and that way, I don't take up a spot for her paying clientele. I mean, I don't mind. I'm more of a night person anyways, and it's easier to have that friendship bonding time since she's always so busy. About 3 hours go by, and she finished my tattoo. She finishes dressing it, and we decide to go get something to eat. Being that it's now 1 a.m. in the morning, there aren't a lot of choices, so we decide to go to a 24-hour Burger King. We call up the most well-known cab company in the small city and hop in. After we tell the driver where we're headed, he begins to do some awkward chit-chat with a very suggestive tone. "So, where are you ladies off to tonight? Going to the bar? Getting drunk?" We laughed a little and said no, that we're just gonna grab a bite to eat. I don't remember exactly what he said next, but it was to be the basic effect of us, or asking us, or suggesting to us that we were more than just friends. My friend and I looked at each other with that "this guy is a real creep" exchange and didn't bother to reply. We arrived at our destination, but before we left the cab, he wrote his phone number down and gave it to my friend. "If you gals ever need anything at all, just give me a call, and I'll be there real quick. My name is Kevin." Unfortunately, the weirdness didn't stop there. We order our food and sit down and begin to eat. The Burger King that we were in had large front windows, and I was sitting on the side of the booth where I could see out. Lo and behold, Kevin is still sitting there. I point this out to my friend, and we both thought, well, maybe he's waiting for his next call. But usually cab drivers will drive off to a more relevant area of the city, or at least away from the location they dropped you off at. Eventually, 30 minutes go by, and as we're eating and chatting, he's still there. I eventually refused to leave until he did, and my friend agreed with me, and we stayed in Burger King for another hour until he finally left. Thankfully, that was the last time we ever saw Creepy Kevin, the cab driver. So, Creepy Kevin, let's never meet again. P.S. Seriously, what is it with cab drivers?